Okay, we're live. We're double live.
Great. Cool. Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining our live stream. We are excited to have you all here. The way that we normally do these, for those people who are new, I start out with just a quick overview of what we've been working on the past month, and then what we're planning to do next month. That usually takes 5 to 10 minutes, and then we just spend the rest of the time answering questions. We rely on you all to submit your questions, so feel free to add them into the questions chat, and then we will just answer them in order. If your question is complicated and you would prefer to ask via voice, then just say like, "Hey, I have a voice question," and we'll just allow you to speak in the Google Meet, and we'll go from there. So I will kick it off. Give me 1 second to share my screen. Cool. Can you see this? Great. All right. So last month was May. Last month, on the publicity side, trying to recruit people, we got up to 11,000 members, which is pretty awesome. We passed the 10K mark in May and then very quickly hit 11 just 2 weeks later. So things are growing, which is great. I think we have the Matt George pitch accent debate to thank for a lot of the growth in the past month. That generated a lot of buzz and introduced us to a new community. So that was pretty exciting and fun to watch. I had fun watching it. So, and then, as many of you may have seen, we released the mission and vision video yesterday and today. We started getting a lot of questions around like our long-term goals. So we wanted to put it into a video and share it with the community. So we're hoping that will also be useful for new people who find us and want to learn more about what we do and what we're trying to do and what we're about. So that also went up on the website yesterday. On the project side, we were originally planning to focus on the simplified guide stage 3 and the quick start guides for Japanese and Spanish, but we decided to push things back a little bit so that we could find a video editor. And that went not great. We need to sort of restart the search because the video editors that we did find did not produce the quality that we wanted. But we did publish the simplified guide stage 3 earlier this week. And so far the feedback has been pretty good. We also, for those who don't know, there's a 1K automatic dex generation project that we've been working on with a member of the community. So trying to use natural language processing to automatically generate the appropriate 1K dex from various resources. And so that produced its first clean results from end to end, which is great. We did it for Spanish. And so the next step is to try it out with another language. French and German are our next 2 that are up. And so what that will allow us to do is generate a first version of a 1K deck that the community can then go through and approve which sentences to use for it, which words, etc. So we're hoping that will be applicable to new languages going forward and make the process just a lot easier. The website V2 project is still in progress and will continue to be in progress for several months. It's pretty much all of the infrastructure necessary going into the future, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit, about what that looks like. I mentioned some of that last month, but I'm just going to recap it. And then Matt has been working on doing a lot of research into Japanese, specifically Japanese grammar, because we are writing the Japanese and Spanish quick start guides, and most of the grammar resources out there, really all of the grammar resources out there, are focused on output, or they are focused on theory and not really focused on practical comprehension. So we sort of need to figure out what the necessary pieces are for a new learner to learn. So there's some research and thought going into that. So the simplified guide, that was the big project that we shipped. And our goal with the simplified guide was to try and shrink it down as much as possible so that new learners could come up to speed quickly. And then it also makes it easier to be translated. So We managed to reduce the size of the guide by 65%, which is enormous. So 45,000 words down to 15,000, which is kind of crazy to me. I did not think we were going to go that far. But the final result, we're very proud of the final result. We feel it came out really clearly, and the ideas are distilled down to exactly what we wanted to share. So, and then the German translation team took stages 0 through 2 and managed to translate the entire thing in just 1 week. So it's definitely producing the results that we were hoping for. So we have a bunch of languages in the process, and then after the mission video yesterday, 3 new people reached out wanting to translate into Hungarian, Danish, and Polish. So those are also getting started now. So for June, we are definitely focused on the Japanese and the Spanish Quick Start guides. We're going to have decks for both of them, and the JV1K we're going to expand to have sentences and native audio. So that will be leveled up. I know that a lot of folks have been complaining that it's just words and definitions, so I think the sentences are really going to help. And same thing for the ES1K deck. We got to do a bunch of website changes to support this new model of how we're going to share information with our community. So there's many different ways that we're planning to change the website. More on that in the next slide. And website V2, just a quick recap of what we're working on with this. The goal of the Quick Start guides is that a new learner can get onboarded into immersion learning in 30 minutes. So we would have exactly what they need to do in order to get started. They don't even need to read the guide before they get started. They can just jump in and get started and then read the guide later. And then the website will also provide direct access to the Discord community, so people won't have to go through the email sign up and get an invitation to join the community, that kind of thing. Patreon benefits, we're going to stop distributing through Patreon. It's all going to come through the new website. And then the resource documents are also going to be embedded into the new website and accessible to people there, rather than what it is now, which is they have to join the Discord, find the link, and then go follow the link to Google Docs. So everything will be streamlined for people, and we're hoping that it just makes life easier for everyone. And that is all I got for this week or this month. So I'm going to stop presenting. And now we can jump over to the question side of things. So not a huge number of questions recently. So if anyone on the call has questions they want to ask, please put them in the chat. Jumping up a bit, Cameron. It looks like Katrina already gave an answer to this, but we'll go through the question again. So Cameron is asking, is it, I'm reading this whole thing, is it considered input if you watch a TV show that has native audio but TL subtitles? He asks because he wants to watch TV with his girlfriend and doesn't want to waste that time in terms of immersion. Yeah, hope that.
I mean, yeah, it's better than nothing. It would be reading immersion, right? So, I mean, it probably depends on your level. If you're at a high enough level where you can actually keep up with subtitles in real time, then yeah, you could say it's the same equivalent as just reading a transcript that had all the lines that you read, right? Except, I mean, maybe you could say it's somewhat cheating because you're listening to the native audio, so you know that's obviously a huge hint. But yeah, I mean, I'd say the issue here is that if you're already at a level where you can keep up with subtitles, then probably the level of language used in the subtitles wouldn't be very challenging for you. But if you're not at that level yet, then you probably can't keep up with the subtitles. So, I mean, overall, I would say, yeah, it's still immersion. Anytime you're contacting your target language, that's immersion. It's going to be beneficial in some way, but it's probably a relatively lower quality form of immersion than, you know, if you're actually listening to the language and reading the subtitles at the same time.
Cool. Thanks for the question, Cameron. Moving on, Jiro 3000. How important is SRS in the grand scheme of things?
I mean, depends what you mean by important. Uh, Obviously, it's possible to learn a language to a really high level without using an SRS. In fact, the interview that I'm releasing in as soon as we finish this live stream is with somebody who reached pretty much a near native level in Japanese, and he never used an SRS. So it's definitely not necessary. It's just something that speeds up the process, right? I found it very beneficial in growing my passive vocabulary extremely quickly to a rate that at a rate that definitely wouldn't have been possible without the SRS. And in fact, I think I reached a final level with my passive vocabulary that I don't know if I ever would have been able to reach without an SRS. So there's definitely, I mean, I think it's undeniable that using an SRS in the right way in combination with immersion lets you progress significantly faster than you would be able to otherwise. But it's not crucial. So in that sense, you could say it's not that important. But yeah, it kind of really depends what you mean by important.
Cool. Thanks for the question. Will is asking a series of questions that we'll go through one by one. Japanese specific questions. How much do you value the importance of learning the Gojuon ordering of the alphabet?
The gold, what is it?
He says Gojuon, G-O-U, or Gojun, sure.
Learning the order of the ordering of the alphabet. I mean, it's not that important, but it's something you probably want to do at some point because, like, for example, if you want to look something up in a physical dictionary, then you need to know the order. So, like, I think I got a lot better at, or I should probably take a step back and explain. Like, yeah, there is such thing as basically alphabetical order in Japanese, and it's basically the order that whenever you see a hiragana chart or a katakana chart, it's the order that they're written in. It goes like a, I, u, e, o, kaki, kuke, ko, and it goes on like that. And so the vowels always go a, I, u, e, o, and there's an order for the consonants too. The a, ka, sa, ta, na, and it keeps going on like that. So it is, yeah, beneficial to know this ordering because if you're ever, like, yeah, looking something up in a dictionary, I think I was about to say that when I started using a physical pitch accent dictionary, I got a lot better at alphabetical order because I was using it a lot. If you ever go to a physical store in Japan, to like a bookstore or a music store or something, then a lot of times the books will be ordered in by the alphabetical name of the author, divided into genres and stuff like that. So in general, yeah, if you want to spend a lot of your future in contact with the Japanese language, you're probably going to want to know it at some point, but I wouldn't prioritize it probably until you reach basic fluency. I think I was already pretty fluent by the time I actually sat down and explicitly memorized the order. Although it doesn't take that long, so I mean, it doesn't matter too much either way.
I mean, in my first Japanese class, we memorized that order, so.
Really? I mean, of course,
yeah.
you memorize the kana in the order, but did they actually like have you memorize like ah comes before sa and stuff like that?
I don't know if we ever explicitly practiced it, but yeah, we just memorized it all in order, and everything that we ever studied was in that order. So.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, I also learned kana in that order, but I think people, if you don't, after a while, you forget about you'll just forget it, if you don't like explicitly practice it.
That's fair. Cool. Will is asking if you do one-on-one consulting. Yes, Will, he does.
Yeah, if you send an email to, I mean, any one of my emails, matt@gmail.com or matt@refill.la, then yeah, we can set it up.
Cool. Next question. Will is asking, how do you search for kanji that you did not know the reading of when reading physical content?
Well, I mean, I have a dictionary app on my phone where you can draw the kanji with your hand. So that's probably the easiest way. And there's a lot of different kanji apps that let you do that. You can also, on iPhones and probably on Androids as well, that you can go into the different input methods and you can turn on like for if you go to the Chinese input methods, there's an input method that you do that is just like you draw the characters. So even though it's meant for Chinese, you can use it for Japanese as well. You can turn on that input method and then you can draw the character with your fingers. Another thing is if you're a little more advanced and you can recognize all the different components, then you can kind of Google like the components and then it will normally come up if you do it that way. But the other thing is once you get to a pretty intermediate level, it's pretty rare to come across kanji that you've never seen before. So for most of the time when I want to look up a word, like for me now, I almost never come across a kanji I've never seen before. And when I do, it normally has furigana, because if I haven't come across a kanji, chances are Japanese people haven't either. And so, yeah, pretty quickly you get to a point where most of the words you don't know are made up of kanji that you know at least one word that uses that kanji. So you can just like type the word and then delete the other character, and then you can basically figure out how to come up with it by searching words, by typing words that you do know that use that character.
I'm just curious, is that ever an issue for native Japanese folks? How do they do it?
It's probably like me, where it's probably rare for a native Japanese person to come across a kanji they've never seen before that also isn't using furigana, because like a lot of times in books, even books meant for adults, there will be furigana on a word if the word uses a really rare kanji. And so if you're a normal person who finished high school, then it's going to be rare for there to be a kanji you don't know and for there to not be any furigana on it. Because if you don't know it, chances are other people wouldn't know it either, and that means it's a problem that there's people couldn't understand this piece of writing. But I think when it does happen, the most common thing is for Japanese people to like Google the different components. Like you could even say like the top part of this kanji plus the bottom part of this other kanji. Like I've seen that on like the Japanese equivalent of Yahoo Answers, people asking about certain characters. So it's probably how they would do it. There also are kanji dictionaries that are based on radical order. It's like a whole skill to even learn how to use a kanji dictionary, but Japanese people are probably trained how to do that at some point in their general education.
Cool. Thanks, Will, for your questions. Kleptomanta is asking, long term, do you expect to still have a detailed and simplified guide, or do you think the simplified will just become the standard? I don't think we've talked about it, actually. I assume that we would still want the detailed one because there are people who actually want to understand the theory. And the simplified guide definitely leaves out a lot of the pieces that you need to, say, perfectly customize your immersion learning experience. Like it's really more action oriented of just do these things that we say. And so to support people who want to be a little bit more meticulous in the way that they design their learning process and want to understand the theory so that they can make better choices, I think the detailed guide still serves a purpose there. And I'd say that the second reason we keep it around is because there's a class of people who want to understand the research and the way that this stuff derives from research. And the current guide doesn't do a great job of actually linking that, but we're planning to do a lot more of that in the second half of the year. Because there are definitely people that come through our community and say, like, how does this actually, compare to the actual second language acquisition research? And we need to do a better job of actually like linking that up in addition to doing our own research. So I don't know if you have any thoughts, Matt.
I mean, I would highly recommend reading the detailed guide to anybody who's serious about using Refold to learn a second language. In my mind, the simplified guide is more to lower the barrier to entry so that people who find Refold can learn about, what it's actually about, what you actually do, and get started much more quickly and not feel so intimidated by having to read this big guide. But once you're kind of in the door, you have everything set up and you're committed to the process, it only takes probably 4 to 5 hours to read the detailed guide. So if you're going to be spending literally thousands of hours learning a language, you might as well invest those 4 to 5 hours to have that next level of understanding about how the process works. I think it would not be very wise to try to skip that, in my opinion. So yeah, I think we'll always have it. I would want to read it if I were using Refold to learn my first foreign language.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Thanks for the question. Kefka is asking, how much understanding of a sentence would you say is necessary for something to be classified as a sentence worth mining for sentence mining? For example, in a prospective 1T sentence, should I have complete understanding of the full nuance of the sentence outside of the specific word I don't know?
I think this question was actually asked in the last Patreon Q&A, and I think I gave a really fleshed out answer, so I'd recommend checking that out. But I think the gist of it was that basically, it was actually kind of a long answer, so it's actually kind of hard to summarize. But you don't have to 100% understand everything in the sentence. But if there's something if you don't completely understand it, in order for it to still be a good sentence to make a card out of, you have to kind of have a meta understanding of why you're not understanding it. So there's certain pieces of the grammar that are pretty common, but for a reason I'm going to explain in an upcoming video, they're pretty hard to acquire until you reach a pretty high level. And so if the sentence but because those things that are hard to acquire come up frequently, you're going to end up seeing them pretty often and realizing like, oh yeah, this is that one thing that I kind of get but hasn't fully clicked yet. So if there's things like that that are in a sentence where you're like, yeah, there's this one little word or component or structure that comes up all the time, I kind of get it, but I'm not 100% clear on what it means in every different context, and that is the thing that is stopping me from otherwise perfectly understanding the sentence, that's still okay to mind. But if there's a more fundamental thing you're not understanding, when you're literally like, I have no idea whether this sentence means A or B, and A and B are two like totally different interpretations, then you don't want to learn it. So yeah, basically you have to definitely know what the gist is, be confident in that, and if there's anything that you don't perfectly understand, you have to kind of be able to understand why you're not perfectly understanding it, I would say. But I also recommend listening to my full answer in the last Q&A.
Cool. Thanks for the question, Kefka. Lepetis is asking, I've been learning Japanese for about 5 months, and I can understand every word in at least half the sentences that are said in slice of life anime. Even though I can understand every word, I still struggle to understand a lot of sentences. I know Refield talks about this as being natural, but how long should this phase take?
I mean, I have a really fleshed out video on this on my main channel called Why You Can't Understand Sentences Even Though You Know the Words, or some variation of that. So I definitely recommend checking that out. This is not something that goes away like forever. It even happens to me in English, right? A lot of times I'm reading a book and sometimes I just can't figure out what a sentence means. A lot of times, like when you're at a high level of fluency, a lot of times the reason it happens to you is because it's a poorly written sentence in the first place. So it's less your fault, more the author's fault. But basically, it just slowly happens less and less often over time, assuming that you're spending time in a domain that you're getting better and better at. So yeah, it should just continually, the better you get, happen less and less often. And it's a stage that you have to pass through, right? Because you can't actually, your brain can't figure out how the grammar works until you kind of have an understanding of what the words in the sentence, right? Because grammar is kind of a higher level phenomenon than words. So, yeah, I mean, it doesn't really sound like you're confused on like why it's happening or what you need to do about it. I guess you're just asking about how long it is, but yeah, all I can say is it happens less and less, but it never fully goes away.
Yeah, they followed the question up saying that they learned German to a very high level and passed through this phase nearly 4 years ago with German, but can't remember how long it took.
So, yeah, I mean, well, because it's not a single stage, you know, it's not like it happens to you and then doesn't happen to you. It just fades out. So I think you should notice it happening like every couple weeks. You should be able to look back and notice that it's happening to you less than it was a couple weeks ago. So maybe not think about it that way.
Do you think it's harder in Japanese than it is in other languages?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's much harder in a language like Japanese because the grammar is totally different, right? And ideas are expressed fundamentally differently. So, like, I was kind of thinking about this. There's like the level of syntax, and on top of that, there's the level of the semantics. And then there's also pragmatics, like on top of that. Those are like different areas of linguistics. So syntax is literally like, you know, on a pure mechanical level, what part of the sentence is in relationship with the other part of the sentence, and what is the, you know, nature of that relationship. And then there's like the semantic level on top of that is like, well, what practical meaning arises out of that? And so both of those levels are completely different in Japanese than in Western languages. So a lot of times, like, you can, I guess, yeah, even for me, it took a long time to really get like not only what's happening on a pure grammatical syntactical level, but what does that really mean to a Japanese person? Why do they say that? You know, like, for example, this is one that's not very difficult, but it's coming to mind. Like in Japanese, sometimes people, as a way to apologize, they'll just say warui, and warui literally means bad. So they'll literally just say bad, and you can imply that it means like, well, I am bad, and that through that it's kind of like in English where you say, oh, my bad. It's a way of apologizing. But on the surface, when you first hear like warui, it's kind of we're like, why are they just saying bad, bad? But what they really mean is sorry, I'm sorry that I did something to you. So there's a lot of times where you have to put yourself through a lot of different contexts so you can get the sense of not only what's happening on the grammatical level, but why does what's happening on the grammatical level create the meaning that exists on the semantic level, above that.
Cool. All right, thanks for the question. I hope you worked through that quickly. Bob is asking, if you have a large 600 plus sentence mined backlog, is it okay to stop mining and focus on immersion only, or should it continue regardless?
I mean, either way, it's totally fine. I mean, I know for me, cards that I've made more recently are more exciting and more fun to learn than cards that I've made like a super long time ago. So if you have a backlog of 600 sentences, some of those are probably multiple months old. And so by that point, you might not even remember making the card. You might not remember the context that it came from. It might almost feel like repping a pre-made deck because it's been so long since you made the card. And so for me, it would be more exciting to make new cards. So I wouldn't limit yourself and be like, I can't make any new cards till I work through this backlog, because it's kind of an arbitrary limitation that might make the whole process more boring. But if you want to do that, then that's totally fine as well, because you'll still be learning new words, and then you'll have more time for immersion. So I'd say like maybe take an approach that's somewhere in the middle, where maybe you make less cards so that you're still shaving away your backlog, but you still make some new cards just for sentences or words that like really draw your attention, are extra interesting, just because why not? Makes the process more fun.
Yeah, if I had a backlog that large, my concern would be that I would be duplicating words that I don't know.
I mean, there's no problem with that, right? If a card comes up, like maybe in your backlog the same word exists twice. Well, the first time that you actually learn it, you'll learn the word, and the second time it comes up, you'll be like, oh, there's a duplicate, you'll just delete it. So I mean, yeah, you wasted some time like making the card, but if you have a nice card making workflow where it only takes you a couple seconds to make a card, then I wouldn't say that's too big of a deal.
Cool. Thanks for the question, Bob. Geospiral is asking, if you search for a word in a dictionary and find other words in that dictionary that could be useful, should you add them right then and there, or wait until you're more advanced and inevitably come across the words later? If you do the first option, how do you avoid using archaic or braggy words in day-to-day speech?
Well, I wouldn't do that personally. I wouldn't learn a word just because it came up in the dictionary. And I'm also wondering what you mean by useful, because that can mean two things, right? It can mean, one, useful in the sense of it might come up in your immersion and learning it will help you understand more. And there's also useful in the output sense of I'd want to use that word myself. But in both versions of that word useful, I wouldn't make a card just because it was in the dictionary, because if you take the comprehension case, right, there is a lot of words in the dictionary that are virtually never used in real life. At least in Japanese, that's 100% the case. So even if a word looks useful, you don't really know if it's useful until you actually find it in your immersion. So you're taking a bet of whether you're going to be wasting your time or not, right? You might be spending time learning a word that you're literally never going to see in your immersion, and therefore, although it seemed useful to you at first glance, it turns out wasn't useful. And you can't really judge that without looking at a frequency list. And on the output end of things, it's kind of a similar deal where maybe it feels useful to you, but again, if you don't actually know that native speakers use it in the type of situation that you're thinking it would be useful to use it in, and whether that's a natural way to say that idea, then you can't use it confidently, and it might lead to you saying something really weird. So, dictionaries are comprehensive in the sense of they list generally every word, regardless of whether it's common or not, regardless of whether people use it in natural conversation. So it really doesn't mean anything practical to you, just that a word exists in the dictionary. For all you know, that means it was used 3 times 100 years ago, basically, right? So, I mean, that's a little extreme. Obviously, dictionaries probably don't put words that are that uncommon in them, but I mean, the principle should hold true. So, yeah, for me, you don't know if something's useful until you come across it in your immersion, and so I don't learn anything until I come across it in my immersion, with the exception of words that are used inside of monolingual definitions. And I learned those because, well, in a way, the definition itself is immersion. and it's a domain that is actually very important to understand, the domain of dictionary definitions. So if a word is used within a definition, I will make the card so that I can increase my ability to comprehend monolingual definitions. But I wouldn't learn a word just because I was flipping through a dictionary and I found a header for a word that like looked like it would be useful in some way.
Cool. Thanks for the question, Geospiral. KDW is asking, I'm doing a soft monolingual transition at the moment. I'm finding that often my brain will latch onto a small bit of the definition that is easy to translate into English, and then that's what I associate with the word. E.g., my brain will see a word and go small boat, example from this morning, even though there was more detail in the definition. Is that normal? Should I do something about that? At the moment, I think I'm getting a less nuanced picture from monolingual than from bilingual, which is the opposite of the goal.
I mean, I think that is pretty normal because I can remember that happening to me. A lot of times, if you understanding one portion of a definition is enough to basically get the gist. A lot of times definitions are, in a way, kind of redundant because, I mean, they're not just trying to tell you exactly what it means. They're also trying to communicate the nuance. And so that's why there can be a lot of information there. And ideally, you would understand it all. It would give you a more full picture of what the word means and what its nuance is. But sometimes, as long as you can get a little chunk of it, that's enough for you to pretty much get what the word's communicating. So if that happens to you, I'd say it's mostly fine. I mean, it's a good way to start off, right? Like, you got to start somewhere with the monolingual dictionary. You can't go from using a bilingual dictionary to perfectly understanding how monolingual definitions work. So I think that's probably natural that most people are going to start off kind of partially understanding definitions, and sometimes that partial understanding is pretty much enough to get the job done. And yeah, maybe you're not missing, maybe you're not getting all the nuance, but that's not a problem because that will eventually get filled in through immersion. And so wouldn't worry too much about it, although you do got to watch out because sometimes you can be led astray in this way because, you know, sometimes that one part of the definition that you understand might be directly contradicted by the rest of the definition, right? Like if we're just going to take a kind of dumb, obvious example, maybe it says small boat, and then the other part that you skipped over was anything that is not a small boat or something, right? So I have seen, like, working with other people in the monolingual dictionary, sometimes they misunderstand words in this way because they understand part of it and they kind of like assume, they use that partial understanding to assume what the word means and they're off. Again, not detrimental in the long run because when you come across the word enough times in your immersion, it'll become clear if you're not understanding it properly because the context won't make sense. But yeah, I'd say it's okay as long as you're skeptical of whether your partial understanding is correct or not, because a lot of times, probably the majority of cases, it will be fine and it will be, although incomplete, going in the right direction, but every once in a while it can totally lead you astray. So just be on the lookout to make sure that doesn't happen.
Yeah, I just want to add a note here. I'm not sure if you have gotten to the card creation phase where you're actually using monolingual definitions on your cards yet, but I have definitely found that I've had the same thing where I latch on to a bit of the definition that like is easy for me to associate, and it won't be until I see that card with that definition 2-3 months later where the rest of it clicks. So the fact that you get an opportunity to see that definition repeatedly, I have found personally beneficial, and eventually those gaps get filled in. So thanks for the question, Katie. Lepidus is asking, I missed the presentation, so there's a chance that I missed this, or maybe it's mentioned elsewhere too, but does Refold plan on advertising outside of YouTube? I don't really know anything about promoting a brand, so maybe this isn't even necessary in your case. We've talked about it, but no, right now we're very focused on building the brand through YouTube. I mean, we also have a Twitter as well. So there's questions around, you know, paid advertising or advertising through blogs or other areas, but generally YouTube has been serving well so far, and in the future it won't just be Matt advocating for it on YouTube. So there's a growth plan outside of just Matt's channel. And so far it hasn't been an issue. We've been growing like pretty well. So, 7 months in, we have 11,000 members in the community. So it hasn't been an issue so far. if we ever get to the point where we want to like pour jet fuel on it in order to grow faster, then maybe we'll dive into paid advertising or something like that. But so far, it just hasn't been necessary.
I mean, I imagine that some point down the line, if everything goes well, we will get to a point where we do paid advertising because it seems like that's probably one of the most practical ways of reaching a super wide audience. But advertising is really expensive, so we would need to have products that we were selling so that we could recoup the money that we put into advertising. Because I don't think it's really realistic to do paid advertising and make that money back with Patreon donations. So there's that. But yeah, in the short term, like Ethan said, we don't really doing just fine without it. But I imagine one day it will happen. But yeah, we'll have to have products during that time so that, because like actually I was reading a little bit about advertising the other day. It's all just like a math equation, right? You know, if you're keeping track of everything, roughly how much money you have to put into advertising to get one customer, and then you know like what is the average lifetime value of a customer, and you just have to make sure the math works out so that you're getting more money back than you're putting in. Otherwise, you're just losing money. So, and then that's not sustainable.
Yeah. I'm personally of the opinion that at the early stages, growth should happen through word of mouth. So people have good results and tell their friends about it, and then they bring it in, and that generally forms a better relationship with the company and between the company and the member. That's how I would like to start. But yeah, eventually advertising is something that we'll get into. Mm-hmm. Thanks for the question. There's only one question left in the chat, so if you've got more, please add them. We still got another 10, 15 minutes left. So, let's see. DJ D-Dog is asking, do you think that learning classical Japanese gave you any benefit for your understanding of modern Japanese?
I mean, yeah, it gave me a ton of benefit. My understanding of modern Japanese is much deeper than it was before I studied classical Japanese, and I could go into a lot of detail on exactly what ways it's deeper, but none of that deeper understanding is mostly an intellectual thing. It's not practical in any way. It doesn't actually lead me to being able to write better Japanese or speak better Japanese or understand modern Japanese, like understand messages that are being delivered to me in modern Japanese on a practical level. It's a purely intellectual understanding where I can look at a structure and be like, I know why this structure is this way. It's not arbitrary. It's because in classical Japanese it used to be like this, and then this change happened, or this got carried over. So I personally found that very enriching and enjoyable. I'm glad I did it, and I would recommend it to anybody who has a passion for Japanese, but it doesn't provide any practical benefits. It's more just like how, in a way, my understanding of English is extremely poor because I've never studied English grammar. Yet that doesn't impede my ability to speak and write the English language and understand messages in the English language. So if I studied Old English, I'm sure my understanding of modern English on an intellectual level would become much deeper, and that would probably be cool, and I'd be interested in doing that one day. But would that actually help me be a better user of the English language in a practical sense? Probably not.
Cool. Thanks for the question. Levitus is asking, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correct, but he said, last question for me. How is finding mats for other languages coming along? Are we going to see any of them on YouTube anytime soon? Yes, you will. So we have 4 verbal yeses, but we still need to work out, how we're actually going to be working with them and what our business relationship is going to look like. We're not planning to launch those until we have content on the website that is relevant to them. So, if we found somebody, the mat equivalent for French, we wouldn't launch that person's Refold brand until we had a French quick start guide and a French 1K deck. And we want to make sure that from day one, they can provide value through Refold as a way to, get their followers into the system. So, it should be happening probably in probably the first one in 2 months. That's my hope. At least that's my target. So pretty soon. Cool. That is the last question. Does anybody else have any questions? They can be random. If not, then I mean, we'll stay on for another 10 minutes just to hang out. But otherwise, I think that might be the end for today's live stream. So, any last questions? Last chance? Oh, we got one person typing. All right. There's an I in your name. Iapetus? Probably still not pronouncing that correctly. Will is asking what our favorite food and favorite pizza toppings are, and that we will be judged.
Okay, you go first.
Everyone's going to hate me for this, but my favorite pizza toppings are mushroom and pineapple. And then favorite food, I really like pad thai and peanut sauce. Good combo.
I mean, I like cheese pizza. I also like veggie pizza. I don't really like meat or pepperoni. I like olives. And yeah, I mean, in general, I don't really have a single favorite. Like, whenever people seem to love to ask, like, what is your favorite X? But for me, I have a bunch of stuff that I like, and it depends what mood I'm in. Like, I never really resonated with the question, what is your favorite X? Because I wouldn't want to, like, limit myself to one thing. And generally, there's not one thing that I feel so much more strongly about than all the other things that I'd be willing to be like, this is the single one winner. Like, nothing comes to my mind with food. I mean, I like lots of Japanese
If you had
food.
to eat one thing for the rest of your life, what would it be?
I mean, I eat peanut butter jelly a lot. I eat that almost every day. I never get tired of it. So
There you go.
I'm gonna have to go with that, or rice or something like rice and like onigiri, like Japanese rice ball. I could probably eat that every day and like never get tired of it.
Yeah. Cool. Well, we're out of questions. So if you want to hang out with us for the next 10 minutes, then stick around and we can just shoot the shit. But otherwise, feel free to drop off. And thank you all for attending. We really, really appreciate
thanks,
it. We really
guys.
appreciate seeing you all here. And thanks for all your great questions. Thanks, Skepka. We appreciate you too.
Maybe it's a good sign that we answered every question. It means that that the fact that there weren't that many questions in the first place must mean that we're doing a good job of teaching, right?
But that's the goal, right? To have nobody ask us questions anymore.
Yeah, everything is clear. Everything has been made known.
Everything has been explained on the website.
But I mean, that's why, like, I feel a lot of times, because I've been doing this for a while, so a lot of times I feel like the answer I want to give is just, I have a video on that, go and watch it. And I feel like that's a kind of cop-out answer, because it's like, well, why do I have to go watch your video? Why don't you just tell me right now? But the reason I want to say that is because I put so much work into that video that it's definitely better than whatever answer I give you right now. Like, I sat down and I crafted an argument, and I thought of different examples, and I packaged it together in a really high-quality way that I can't do just off the top of my head, right? It's like I'm not going to be able to remember all the examples. I'm not going to remember the exact argument or what I said. So if you go and watch the video, you're going to get a superior answer than what you'll get out of my mouth right now. But at the same time, it feels like really weird to just for every question be like, oh, just go watch my video. Oh, go read the article. We already wrote about that, But that's like why it feels. It's not just that we're lazy and we don't want to do it again. It's that like we know we can't beat that video or can't beat that article that we put so much work into.
We got one more question. Iapetus has asked, I feel like I keep stumbling across new tools all the time that I could further optimize my language learning process / setup, but I keep wasting my time setting them up instead of immersing. Should I just stop looking for new tools if I am at least satisfied with my immersion setup and Anki card creation speed right now?
I would say, yeah, definitely. I mean, there's a word for that, right? FOMO, fear of missing out. It's basically when you end up wasting wasting your time. Well, there's a lot of different versions of it, but in this case, right, it's like wasting your time going and always learning new tools and learning about new tools instead of just using the tools you have to actually learn a language. And for me personally, the tools have got to the point where I'm already satisfied with my setup, and it just doesn't seem like a good use of time to be constantly chasing all this stuff. Like, in my opinion, it's pretty much reached a point of diminishing returns, at least when it comes to like quick lookups and card creation. Like, the vast majority of all the tools out there, when you just boil it down to like what is it doing, it's increasing the speed at which you can look words up and make cards, and that's it. Maybe there's some that help you like get passive audio better, but that's almost what all the tools do. So if you have a setup where you can look things up relatively quickly and easily, and you can make cards relatively quickly and easily, then the benefits that you're going to be getting from spending more time learning new tools is almost definitely not going to actually be worth it, right? You could just be making cards during that time or doing more immersion. So I think that like maybe every 6 months you can do a check-in and see like, okay, what's the newest like up-to-date meta when it comes to the tools and stuff. But besides that, I mean, someone who does nothing but make all their cards manually and then but is never distracted by looking up new tools, like ultimately they're probably going to end up making progress just as fast as the person who has the fastest setup in the world, but half their time is spent just like talking and figuring out how new tools work and troubleshooting and all that other stuff that comes along with it.
Yeah, I have the opposite problem. I hate setting up new tools, so I will put up with terrible workflows for a long time before I feel the need to actually fix it. But hey, like Google spreadsheets and importing that directly into Anki has been working great for 6 months. So
I mean,
actually more, it's been almost a year. So
one thing to think about is there's this idea called the Lindy principle, which basically says that the expected lifetime, expected lifetime of many things in the world are directly proportional to how long they've been in existence. And that might sound really counterintuitive. I think there's a better way to word it, but basically it's the idea that like a bicycle has been in existence longer than a car, or bicycles in general have been in existence longer than cars, and so they're likely to outlive cars. Or like a book that was written 100 years ago and is still read today is likely to continue to be read 100 years from now, whereas a book that was written 10 years ago is likely to not be read much longer than 10 years in general, like on average, right? And so when something's basically the practical application of this is the idea that if something's brand new, you have no way to know whether it's really going to last or whether it's just a fad. Whereas if something has been around for a significant period of time, that shows that it's probably not a fad and there's probably something there. And so rather than taking a risk with every new thing as soon as it comes out and potentially wasting your time with a fad, if you wait until something's a little bit more established before you incorporate it, then you're going to waste less time total on things that turned out to have been fads. So that's the way I kind of think about it. So if like for 6 months in a row you hear someone talking about hear many people talking about some tool that is so good, okay, then probably check it out. Whereas if you just see a new Reddit post on a tool that came out of nowhere, maybe don't spend your time on it because maybe it's a really crappy tool and no one's ever going to talk about it again after this one Reddit post,
Cool. Will is asking, are we going to make hats? Yeah, I need to find actually, one of my to-dos right now is to find someone to sort of own the merch process because I have not had time to do it. We have like a whole list of things that we need to create on the merch side, and I just haven't been able to find the time. So I'm going to find somebody to do it for me, and hats will be one of the things. Cool. Another question from Iyabhetis. Did Matt delete his video on Morphman? I was looking for it the other day and I couldn't find it.
Yeah, I deleted it. I removed all my videos on Morphman because I don't recommend Morphman anymore. Because it just doesn't work very well as a program and there's so much that goes wrong with it. And I feel like if someone starts adopting Morphman because I recommended it and I I haven't provided the resources necessary for them to like follow through with it and like troubleshoot and get help, it's kind of irresponsible, right? Like if I just throw this tool onto them when there's no good path forward for actually getting help and getting it set up, then I might just be wasting someone's time. And because I don't believe in Morphman enough to put in the effort to like keep my guide up to date that I had, or make new videos that address the updates and things, because it's already been updated a bunch of times, so my videos are out of date anyway. It just feels like, yeah, I don't it just isn't worth supporting. And I also feel like if I have a video on something, that implicitly signals that I'm a supporter of it and I believe it in it, right? If someone says, oh, Matt made a whole video about this, in fact he made maybe 2 or 3 videos about it, that signals, oh, Matt thinks that this is a good idea. And I no longer think Morphman is a good idea, so I feel it's irresponsible to leave those videos up. And the one exception I made to this principle of I remove videos that I don't agree with anymore is the kanji video. I removed my original RTK video because I don't think doing RTK is a good idea. But I decided to put that video back up mainly just because it has a lot of views. It has almost 200,000 views and it gets a lot of views. And for a lot of people, that video was what introduced them to my content in general. And so it's kind of just like, it just does a really good job of advertising. And so I put that video up just because it's so beneficial for advertising reasons. And I put in the description, all caps, I no longer believe in the argument I made in the video here. This video is all wrong. And I put it in a pinned comment. But like I said, I did that because that video gets so many views that it's good for exposure, whereas Morphman is not really the case anyway. And so I just decided to remove it.
Yeah, I remember trying to set up Morphman and finding it horrible. I like couldn't get through it.
Yeah, the concept behind Morphman is a good idea, but the implementation is awful. And I made those videos shortly after discovering Morphman, before I was familiar with how poor the implementation was. If I would have, understood how bad Morphman works, I probably never would have I would have never talked about it publicly, I don't think. So that is a regret that I have. I should have not jumped on Morphman so quickly.
The problem that you were just talking about.
Exactly. Yeah.
New shiny thing. Cool. Well, I think on that note, we can let this one go. So again, thank you all for attending. Really appreciate it. Great to see you all. Thanks for hanging out with us. And we'll see you again in a month.
Yeah, thanks so much, guys.